My name is Leo, and for most of my life, I lived in the shadow of a family dynamic that was broken long before I could even understand the word divorce. My parents separated when I was just 8 years old, and for the next decade, I was a human. Ping pong ball bouncing between my father's quiet, structured home and my mother's chaotic, ever-changing world. My father was a man of few words but deep actions. He was a hard working architect who spent his life building a legacy, not for himself but for me. My mother, on the other hand, was a woman who lived for the moment, often at the expense of the future. After the divorce, she remarried quickly to a man named Robert, who already had the seeds of laziness planted deep in his soul. Together, they had 2 more children, my half-siblings, who I barely knew because the age gap made us feel like strangers sharing a bloodline. 6 months ago, my father passed away suddenly from a heart attack at the age of 47, leaving me with a hole in my heart and a legal document that would change everything. He left me his house, a beautiful, spacious property in a quiet neighborhood that he had meticulously maintained for years. It was the only place I ever felt truly at peace. I moved in 3 months ago, finally feeling like I had a foundation to build my own life upon. But as the saying goes, no good deed goes unpunished, and my peace was about to be shattered by the very woman who brought me into this world. It started with a phone call from my mother, her voice trembling with a desperation that I hadn't heard in years. She told me that Robert had lost his job due to downsizing and that they were on the verge of becoming homeless. They had been living in a cramped motel for 2 weeks, and their savings were completely gone. My mother is a stay-at-home mom, which in her case meant she had no safety net of her own. Despite the distance between us over the years, the guilt of seeing my own mother on the streets was more than I could bear. I told her they could move into the extra bedrooms in my father's house for a little while, until they got back on their feet. I thought I was being a good son, but I didn't realize I was inviting a parasite into my sanctuary. When they arrived, they didn't look like people who were grateful for a roof over their heads. They looked like they were moving into a hotel, where I was the concierge. Robert immediately claimed the living room couch as his permanent residence, spending his days smoking and watching television while my half-siblings ran through the halls without any supervision. I tried to be patient, telling myself that they were going through a hard time, but the tension in the house began to grow like a dark cloud. My mother was impressed by the house, but she didn't know it was an inheritance, she assumed. I had somehow become incredibly wealthy overnight. When I finally told her that my father had left it to me, I expected a moment of respect for his memory. Instead, I saw a flicker of greed in her eyes that chilled me to the bone. For the next few weeks, the atmosphere in the house shifted from uncomfortable to downright hostile. Robert made no effort to find a job, using the excuse of a recession to justify his laziness, while my mother began to treat me like a guest in my own home. She started rearranging the kitchen, throwing away my father's old mugs, and complaining that the master bedroom, which I occupied, should belong to her because she was the elder. I stood my ground, but the psychological warfare was draining. Then came the night that changed everything. My mother sat me down after the kids were asleep, her expression cold and calculated. She informed me that she had consulted a lawyer and intended to contest my father's will. She claimed that the house was rightfully hers because she had supported my father in the early days of his career, and that the divorce settlement years ago hadn't been fair. She told me to my face that I should start looking for a new place to live because she was going to have me evicted from the house my father built for me. I was speechless. I had given them a home when they were homeless, and their response was to try and steal the roof from over my head. The betrayal was so deep, it felt like a physical wound. I realized then that my mother didn't see me as her son. She saw me as a hurdle between her and a free house. I walked to my room and locked the door, my hands shaking as I realized I was now at war with my own blood. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was racing with every possible scenario where I could lose my father's legacy. The next morning, I called my father's longtime lawyer, who had handled everything, from the divorce to the final will. He was just as shocked as I was when I told him about my mother's plan. He laughed when I mentioned her claim about the divorce settlement being unfair. He pulled up the records and reminded me that she had received nearly $80,000 in alimony and assets, a massive sum at the time. He assured me that her chances of winning in court were practically zero, especially since she had remarried and had no contact with my father for nearly a decade. However, the legal reality didn't change the emotional devastation. My own mother was willing to make me homeless just to secure her own comfort. I spent the day in a state of cold rage, realizing that kindness without boundaries is just self-destruction. I decided that the little while I had promised them was officially over. I walked into the kitchen where Robert was eating my food and watching my TV, and I told them they had 24 hours to pack their bags. My mother laughed, thinking I was bluffing. She told me that the law was on her side and that I couldn't kick them out. She didn't realize that I had already documented their behavior and that my lawyer was preparing a formal trespassing notice. I told her that time would tell who owned the house, but for now she was an unwanted guest and her invitation was revoked. The next morning at 6 a.m., I woke them up and told them the police were on their way if they didn't leave immediately. They tried to lock themselves in the guest room, but I had already removed the interior locks the night before. Robert tried to get aggressive, but I stood my ground, reminding him that he was a guest in a house he didn't pay a cent for. When the police arrived, my mother tried to put on a performance, crying and telling them that I was a heartless son who was throwing a family onto the street. But I had the deed to the house, the will, and the legal advice to back me up. The officers saw the situation for what it was, a property owner, exercising his rights against people who were trying to steal his home. They were escorted out with their suitcases and foldable beds, looking like the frauds they were. I watched from the porch as they loaded their things into their beat-up car, my heart heavy but my mind clear. I felt a strange sense of relief as the silence returned to my father's house. But the story didn't end there. Over the next week, my phone was bombarded with messages from my mother ranging from vicious insults to desperate pleas for mercy. She told me they were back in a motel and were running out of money again. She even had the audacity to ask me to pay for their legal fees for the very lawsuit she had filed against me. I ignored her, focusing on securing my house with new locks and a security system. I was done being a victim of my own empathy. Week passed and the guilt started to creep in, not for my mother or Robert, but for my half-siblings who were innocent in all of this. They were children suffering for the sins of their parents. My mother texted me saying they were truly on the verge of the street. I made her an offer I told her I would take the kids in and provide for them, but she and Robert were never allowed to step foot on my property again. She exploded in rage, calling me a monster for trying to separate a mother from her children. She didn't want a solution. She wanted the house. I realized then that she was using those kids as human shields to get what she wanted. I went back to silence. Then out of the blue, Robert called me. He sounded broken, a shadow of the arrogant man who had been smoking on my couch. He told me they were leaving the city to move in with his brother, who owned a poultry farm in a rural area. He didn't ask for the house this time, he asked for bus tickets. He said they were starving, and my mother was too proud to ask for help anymore. Despite everything, I couldn't let them starve. I agreed to meet them at the motel one last time to give them the money for the tickets and a little extra for food. I wanted to see my mother's face one last time to see if there was any shred of the woman I remembered from my childhood, or if she was completely gone. The motel was a dismal place, the air thick with the smell of cheap cleaner and despair. Robert met me in the lobby, his eyes downcast as I handed him the envelope of cash. He led me to their room where my mother was sitting on the edge of a stained bed, her hair unkempt, and her spirit clearly broken. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, but then I remembered the lawyer's notice she had served me with. She didn't scream at me this time, she just looked at the floor. She finally admitted that she had been stupid, that she knew she had no right to the house. But she was just desperate. It was the first honest thing she had said in months. I told her that desperation doesn't justify betrayal and that she had destroyed the only bridge she had left. I told her the money I was giving her was the final payment on my debt to her as a son, and that from this moment on we were strangers. She nodded silently, a tear finally rolling down her cheek. I hugged my half-siblings goodbye, telling them to be brave, and I walked out of that motel room without looking back. As I drove away, I realized that I had finally fulfilled my father's wish. He didn't just leave me a house, he left me the means to stand on my own 2 feet and the strength to protect what is mine. A few days later, I received a text from my mother. They had arrived at the poultry farm. She sent a photo of the kids chasing chickens in a dusty yard, and for the first time in months, they looked like they were smiling. She told me Robert was starting work as a laborer on the farm, a job he once said was beneath him. It wasn't the life of luxury they had tried to steal from me, but it was a life of honest work. I felt a sense of closure that I didn't think was possible. I realized that by kicking them out, I hadn't just saved myself, I had forced them to actually face their reality and find a way to survive without parasitic behavior. I spent the next few weeks deep cleaning my father's house, removing every trace of their presence and restoring the rooms to the way my father liked them. I felt his presence in the quiet halls, a silent approval of the man I had become. I started a small garden in the backyard, a place where things could grow from the ground up, just as I was doing with my own life. I realized that inheritance isn't just about property or money, it's about the values passed down from one generation to the next. My father taught me resilience, and my mother taught me the cost of greed. Both lessons were necessary for me to truly grow up. I still speak to my mother occasionally, but our conversations are brief and strictly about the kids. She tells me about their school and the farm, and I tell her about my work. We don't talk about the house or the lawsuit anymore. Some wounds are too deep to ever fully heal, and the trust that was broken can never be fully restored. I've started a trust fund for my half-siblings for when they turn 18, so they can have the head start that their parents tried to steal from me. I want them to know that they have a brother who cares for them, even if their family life was a mess. I've become a successful architect, in my own right, following in my father's footsteps. And every house I design is built with the same care and integrity that he put into mine. I often sit on the porch of my father's house watching the sunset, and I realize that the greatest revenge isn't seeing your enemies suffer, it's living a life so full and successful that their actions no longer have power over you. I am Leo, and I am the master of my own destiny, the protector of my father's legacy, and a man who knows the true value of a home. Looking back, I realized that the storm my mother brought into my life was exactly what I needed to clear the air. It forced me to define my boundaries and realize that being a good son doesn't mean being a doormat. I learned that you can love someone and still tell them no, and that you can forgive someone without letting them back into your life. My father's house is no longer just a building. It's a symbol of my strength. Every brick and every beam represents a choice I made to stand up for myself. As I prepare for the future, I know that I am ready for whatever challenges come my way. because I've already faced the hardest one of all, the betrayal of blood. I am at peace, I am secure, and I am finally home. The journey from grief to betrayal to justice was long and painful, but it led me to a place of true independence. I will always be grateful for the house my father left me, but I am even more grateful for the man he helped me become. The story of the stolen inheritance is over, and the story of my new life is just beginning.